What sinuses does, or these sinuses which are this pocket of holes, what they do is that they help to humidify. They help to air condition the air. Why? Because the temperature in the external environment is always different from the temperature in the human internal environment. So the air you are breathing into the system needs to be humidified in order to match the internal temperature of the body. So as you are breathing in, of course, we are talking about inspiration now and expiration, in respiratory system. As you breathe in air, the air will go through this area of the nasal cavity, which we call the choana. These choanal parts, which are these tubunates that is found in this nasal cavity, they have the air being humidified coming from the ostias of these sinuses, cooling the air so that as it goes through the pharynx, which is this pharynx you are seeing, and then journey through the trachea to goes into the lung, the oxygen will be able to match up with the internal environment oxygen, internal environment temperature. And therefore, the air gets humidified. When it gets humidified, it goes through the pharynx and moves down the pharynx to hit the larynx. And of course, one importance of this oxygen is also to this larynx is that it helps in speech resonation, the speech pronunciation, resonance of speech, because without air, speech cannot be made. The reason why you could hear me now is because of what? Air hitting and passing through and resonating my vocal cord, and thereby having the ability to produce speech. And therefore, this same air, you see, as it journeys through, and then it hits this, larynx, before going into this trachea. But mind you, it's not as easy as you see. Why? Because posterior to the trachea is another tube. A very good example, if this is the trachea, let's say this is the trachea. Now, posterior to the trachea, we have another opening, which is another tube. And then in between here, we have rings of cartilage. This ring of cartilage, of course, the trachea, as you can see, is made up of rings of cartilage. This is the trachea, and this other tube is the esophagus. In other words, we have the trachea in front. At the back, which is the posterior, you have the tube, which is what? Esophagus. And you know that at the back of this tube, which is the esophagus, as you are seeing here, that is strictly meant for what? Carrying food into the stomach for digestive system. And the pharynx that we are talking about is a passageway for both air and food. In other words, your pharynx carries oxygen, and your pharynx also carries what? Food. Are you seeing it now? Mixture of what? Oxygen and food. But when it gets to the point of the laryngopharynx, there is a distinct distribution of food not entering into the trachea. The food has to go into what? This second tube called the esophagus, that will carry the food from the esophagus to where? The stomach, for digestive system. Are you getting this now? And then, what about the air, the oxygen? The oxygen will have to what? Be directed to go into the trachea. And that is why we call this trachea the windpipe. Air passageway, airways, the windpipe. Why? Because food is not allowed to pass through there, except what? Only oxygen. Are you following now? Then what makes this to be coordinated is, of course, if you look at the floor of the mouth, which is the oral cavity, you have the tongue. Your tongue is here. You have the tongue. At the back of the tongue, we have the structure we call the epiglottis. This epiglottis helps in flapping and directing food. In other words, when you are swallowing, this structure here, which is this trachea, is being closed to direct, when swallowing, to direct the food not to enter into this tube, but to enter into the what? The posterior tube, which is what? Esophagus. So that the food can go to the right destination, which is what? Go down to where? The stomach, below, in the abdominal cavity. Are you getting this now? And in the same way too, if air, as we're talking about the journey of air, oxygen, as air is going through, by the time it gets to this same spot, then the esophagus is also what? Closed, so that the air can pass through where? The trachea, which is the windpipe. Are you seeing how air, oxygen, and food is being distributed now? Are you getting it? Why? Because the pharynx is both passageway for what? Oxygen and food. Are you getting this now? So now, by the time air, because we are talking about the respiratory system, not digestive system, by the time air passes through, the journey continues. But there is one thing about the trachea. If you look at the interior of the trachea, it's made up of cilia. It's just like this. Let's say this is our trachea. For instance, inside the trachea, you have cilia. Cilia are hair-like structures. Are you following? They are hair-like structure, hair-like, like hair, inside the trachea. And what they do is that I was talking about first, the first mechanism of how hair is being filtered in the respiratory system. I said the first thing is your nose. In your nose, you have hairs. There are hairs in your nose. The hairs in your nose are not for faction. They are for what? Filtering of what? Oxygen. Because why? The air we breathe in is not always pure. This air you are breathing in that you cannot see contain dust, contain bacteria, contain all kind of microbes. And therefore, the nose serves as the first means of defense by filtering it. That's why you see sometimes your nose are always dirty, full of dirt. Are you following now? By, when you put your hand or you put something in your nose, you see it's always dirty. Why? Because of the hairs. Over time, as you are breathing in and breathing out air, you find out that this air contains, the oxygen contains dust that must not go into your lung. Then, nevertheless, 100% is not, the airs in the nose will not do that work 100%. There are still some dust, that will still pass through the nasal cavity, go through the pharynx, and then go into the trachea. Now, the mucus, of course, that interior of this structure is made up of mucous membrane. And mucous membrane secretes mucus. And in between the mucus, you have the cilia. So as the oxygen is journeying through this trachea these cilia help to trap dust that is found, not just dust, even microbes that is found journey through the trachea. Why? So that the lung will not be perforated or saturated with dust that could cause damages to the lung. Are you getting it now? Or bacteria that could cause deflection or issues to the lungs. And therefore, these are further trapped, cleansed. As it journey and go to the bronchi, the same thing, they are further cleansed before the air will get into the lung. In other words, air goes into the lungs now is fully what? Checked and balanced. Is fully screened. Screened of what? Screened of microbe, screened of dirt before getting into the lungs. Are you getting the gist now? Are you following? Before getting into the lungs. And now, eventually, when the air goes into the lung, the journey continues. Let me use another color here so that you understand what I'm saying. What we are saying is this. Now, this is oxygen journey in. As it is journey in, by the time the oxygen gets into this part, it is split. Because why? There are two roads, two ways. The left bronchi and the what? The right bronchi. So oxygen will split here and what? Split here. And goes on the left bronchi into the left lung, on the right bronchi into the right lungs. And as it goes into the right lungs, it splits into three parts now. It splits here, and splits here. Are you seeing it now? Going on the lobe, the second lobe, and the third lobe. Then going on the left it splits at this junction into two, going on the two lobes. Are you getting it now? On this lobe and on this lobe. And when it gets to this lobe, it further splits into the subdivision, which are the bronchioles, until it gets to the storage point, which is what? The alveoli, which I'll be showing you the journey shortly, how it gets to the alveoli for gaseous exchange. And then, when it gets to the alveoli, waiting for what? For gaseous exchange, which I told you earlier, we call the what? The external respiration. But here is the thing. For this structure to function, because I'm just giving you an overview foresight of what the system is, by telling you about how it journeys through the pharynx, how it goes through the trachea, and then goes into the what? Lungs. Now, if you look at, permit me to clean now, so that I will show to you how this structure is, okay. Now we have this surrounding these lungs. We have cartilage. We have ribs. 12 pairs of ribs. 12 pairs of ribs surrounding each lungs. 12 pairs of ribs. Okay, there are 12 pairs. 12 here, 12 here, make it 24. That surrounds the each lungs. And these ribs, in between these ribs, we have the intercostal muscles. Intercostal muscles in between these ribs that helps in inspiration and expiration. We also have intercostal muscles on the other side, which is on the right side. Intercostal muscles. Now I'm giving you the muscles. What I'm giving to you now are muscles that are involved in inspiration and what? Expiration. Breathing in and breathing out. So we have the intercostal muscles in between the ribs. Then we have the external intercostal muscles. Are you following? And then we have the internal intercostal muscles. Okay? External intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles, and what? Intercostal muscle. The same way here, external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles surrounding these ribs. And of course, you know by anatomy that these ribs are connected by the clavicle. The clavicle connects these ribs. So we have the clavicle here, which we call the collarbone, to meet with the sternum, which is the breastbone, to form the rib cartilage. And then at these other points too, we have another muscle or structure that separates the thoracic from the abdominal, which we call the diaphragm. The diaphragm. The diaphragm is dome shape, yes. You should not mind the drawing, it's dome shape. The diaphragm is dome shape, actually in structure. So now we have the diaphragm, the external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles, and intercostal muscles, all with the ribs forming what we call the rib cage that helps in the breathing process, in expiration and what? Inspiration of what? Air, oxygen, and what? Carbon dioxide in and out of what? This system. Are you following? And then another thing you must take note of again anatomically is that there is a space in between the lungs. Now we have used the rib cage now. There is a space in between the lungs and the thoracic wall. You know, this is the thorax. So there is a space, a little space in between the lungs. The lungs is not fully attached to the thorax. thoracic wall. There is a space in between, and that space is what we call the pleural cavity. We have the pleural cavity. Now, this pleural cavity is the space that enables the lungs to inflate and what? Deflate. Remember, as you are breathing in and out, the lungs are what? Inflating and what? Deflating at the space of what? The pleural cavity.